What's up, gang? I am Richie, and this is the Flip Side with Richie Flip, my podcast where we talk about all things kind of related to someone like me, 50 or older, going through everything you could possibly think about going through in life. This is going to be a special podcast slash episode for me because I'm going to walk you through something it was 9 years in the making to finally get done, and very proud of it. Kind of walk you through why I did it, when I did it, the inspiration behind it, and where it's going to go from here. But let's get into it. So, what is this podcast all about? Well, this episode, it's about this: meeting Uncle Jake. My first book, my only book so far, but hoping there's going to be more coming down the road. This was it started off as a bucket list item, and then as I went through this exercise and doing things and just really getting elbows deep into this and writing things I'd never thought about writing before in my life, you look back on it and it has really shaped a lot of the ways in terms of how I look at day-to-day things today, things in the past, looking forward. So I'm kind of going to be all over the place, I think, on this one, not by design, but because there's just so many things as I think about them, because like I said, it's been 9 years from when this started. To just kind of explain, how, when, why, all that good stuff. Like I said, this was a bucket list item. It was meant to be nothing more than that. I had started writing something even way before this, and it was brutally honest. To be brutally honest with you, it was awful. It was just terrible. I remember sitting at my laptop, and my Word document was open, and I'm just writing things, and I was like, "This is just god awful." And I think I put it away for quite a while, and didn't even think about writing anything for a good amount of time. And then to kind of fast forward to February of 2016, and why is this important? Because this is kind of where everything kind of stemmed from, where it kind of this book started to take shape. I don't remember the exact dates, but February of 2016, and I don't think it went into March of 2016, but there was a 3 or 4 week span, maybe 3.5 weeks, where I had to go to 3 different wakes for different family members. And again, we all do things differently, no matter where you are in the country, even in the world. But I could tell you, being in New Jersey, North Jersey, that whole Northeast area, when someone passes away, what you do is, you wake them, or you go to a wake, which is basically paying your respects. Where you go, it's usually a 2-hour session. It could be more than 2 hours. It could be more than 2 sessions. A 2 to 4 viewing, and then a 7 to 9 viewing, whatever it might be. Where you would go and just pay your final respects to whoever it was, a friend, a family member. It's just the way it was. And the joke that I always kind of said to everyone, who knows me, is that going to a wake was like going to a family reunion, because you see people you haven't seen in years, and there's a very good time the next time you see them is either going to be at somebody else's wake or funeral, or their wake or funeral themselves. And it's kind of like a little inside joke, I guess, but it truly was. You see people, you talk to people you haven't seen in years, and you say, hey, yeah, we're going to get together, let's do this and let's do that, and it never happens. However, I can say, as far as just a little personal note, that's something I did get to do with my cousins at one point, and one of them has passed on, unfortunately, but we still try to get together and just talk, and group text and group chats, just to kind of keep that flow of communication going. But these wakes I was going to was just because I was probably older. They just hit home a little harder, I think, is kind of the best way to really share it with you. Look, when you're in your teens or your 20s or even your 30s, the way you view or understand death is very different than I would think what you're going to experience in your 40s and 50s and going forward. Only because at that point, Father Time is not on your side, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it just kind of got me thinking about that whole going to the wakes, and you're kind of getting to that older age group, and people are passing on, and you start thinking about yourself. And something clicked in me during this whole time when I was going to these 3 wakes. My father, and for one of them, I know my father wasn't able to go to either of my parents, because they were actually down in Florida on vacation, and they couldn't get back in time. They just couldn't do it. So I kind of went to represent the family. Somebody always would send, if you didn't go, someone from the family would go to represent and pay your respects. So, my father had told me to do that, and I did. And things that he has told me, he's passed a few years ago, but the things he always kind of told me stuck with me. And for some reason, I kind of zeroed back and zoned back on another wake we had gone to, and I had to be 10, 11 years old, maybe younger at this point. And it was for my uncle Alex. This was back in New Jersey as well. And again, I wish I kind of remember the year on this, but I really can't. But anyway, we went to the wake, and I think it was an afternoon wake for some reason. I seem to remember this. And if you've never been to a wake before, it's in a funeral home. You get in there, and there's a casket, where the deceased is kind of, they're there, and it's an open casket usually. And you go up and you pay your respects. And what does that mean? Well, in that particular case, paying your respects means there's usually a place for you to kneel, and it usually will fit about two people side by side, so you can go there and say a prayer, and you go on and you say your condolences to the family that's there. I remember my father being up there with me, and he said something, and it's never left my head. And I think that was part of the genesis for this book, was that he goes, "Hey, look at him. He went with a smile on his face." What? And I took a look at my uncle. I was like, "Whoa, he's got a little bit of a grin on his face." That means absolutely nothing to most people, and I forgot about it for years and years and years, decades basically. But as I got older and I started going to these different, viewings and all that, that triggered something in my mind, when he said that. And I started to wonder, what if? What if the people that, leave us know ahead of time what's going on? They know something's going to happen. Someone has kind of given them the heads up. You got a couple weeks, get ready for it, and maybe that's why, in this imagination of mine, he went with a smile on his face, because he was able to finish everything he needed to, and he went in peace. I don't know, that it was, all these thoughts started coming to me. And that was years ago, right? So over time, after these 3 weeks, these 3 weeks of going to these different viewings, I mean, again, you start thinking about things, and you almost over or obsessed with them in terms of how you're thinking about them. And oh my goodness, what happens when I go, and what's gonna, as you get older, that clock is ticking. And I kind of just channeled it into something as far as, hey, let's, you know, dying, it is always going to be sad for somebody, but why not make it a little more interesting? And it's not necessarily what happens after death, but maybe what happens before it. If that makes any sense, maybe there's a way to prepare for it to make it a little bit easier for people. I don't know, and I just kind of went with this idea. Um, and it was funny because you start doing your research. Well, how do you write a book, and how do you do this, and well, you got to develop your characters. You got to write these outlines, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. Beep, bop, bop, boop. I just sat down at my laptop and started typing, and it was just type, 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 type. All right, try to remember. Okay, this is a person's name. Maybe jot it down, write it down, and then go from there. Um, and that was how this book went from start to finish. I don't remember exactly when I started writing, but I guess it was maybe within that first year, I guess, because I do remember where I was typing out the beginning of it, and probably it was typing things out where I shouldn't have been typing them out, and maybe doing actual work, that sort of thing. But it just grew, and I started typing, started doing things, and this story started to take shape. So for meeting Uncle Jake, a lot of people, when I told people I was writing a book, well, what's it about? What do you? I didn't know. I still don't know what to tell people. I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't seem to fall into a category. And by all means, if you can put it into a category, do it. That'd be great. Um, it could be self-help. It could be spiritual. It could be, fiction. It could be almost anything. It really kind of, because it hits a lot of different things. So unfortunately, and that's, shameless plug here, maybe not so shameless. It's on Amazon. You can buy a hard, a paperback copy of it. You can download it from an ebook from Amazon. But when I was putting it up there, it's like, well, give it some categories. And that was like almost the hardest part for me to do, was to put it into a category. So I did different things. So it was, spiritual, self-help, motivational, all the things I could think of, because at some point it does touch upon all that. So it was just kind of strange to have to actually start giving it this life, I guess. And it took me 9 years from the time, I guess, I started writing it to, I guess, last year, February of 25. is when it actually went live on Amazon, for people to see. And it just came in spurts. There's no other way to describe it. It wasn't like, I wasn't very structured in terms, okay, well, today I'm going to write and tomorrow I got to do this and then I'll write the next day. Uh, it came in huge chunks of just creativity, if you want to call it that. I would write something and it would stop. And then I seem to remember I knocked out about half of this book, or maybe even more, in about a 2 hour span where something clicked and I just sat down, typed, and off I went. So it definitely came in spurts. I wish would have been more, in a timely fashion, not less time, but that's how this seems to work. So, and I just went with it. And then unfortunately things happen. Life gets in the way. You can't do this, you can't do that. And then you got to start worrying about getting an editor. Are you going to publish it? And it got to the point where I was so turned off, I just stopped. The book was basically done. I had to go back and kind of, check a few things. But when you start running, price, well, someone's got to edit it, and it's going to be like 5 cents a word. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when it's 45,000 words, that adds up. So if you ever get a chance to read this book, in the forward of it, I have a huge thank you to my buddy Gary, who actually helped me with the editing. He seemed to really dig the book. So I kind of went that route, and he helped me. We got a lot done, and then it stopped again. And it was last year, early 25. I was like, this has to get done. This has to get done. I will do it myself. I will self-publish it myself. I'm going to publish it knowing that there's going to be maybe a couple train wrecks I didn't get to fix or change, or something's not going to be right. And that'll be that. And that was the motivation I needed to get this to the finish line. And I did. And it was amazing. It was, to say that I wrote a book, to say that I've got, and actually my cousin Michael did the artwork for me. I told him, here's what I need. And he's like, all right, cool. And we did it and we got it done. So, that was a fantastic help for me as well, because I just, I'm not a graphic guy. I don't know what I'm doing. So we were able to get that done. And for all the things we're talking about here, I'm going to try to get links to everyone's information down below. Within, if depending where you're downloading this from, if there's a description there and you can pull some links and some names and things like that, I'm going to put it all down there for you so you guys can check it out. Especially if you want to, buy the book, Amazon. Just saying, shameless plug. But will it lead to another book? I don't know. I'm hoping it does. It'd be great. But it's just very time consuming, and there's like a million things I want to do, and I just don't know how to get there. But as far as the book itself, I kind of went off on this huge tangent. I told you I would. But what this book is about, I kind of alluded to it a little bit before. We talk about life after death and what happens. I wanted to take it from the approach of what happens just before death. Is there something going on that we don't know about? Something that maybe, I don't want to say look forward to. It's not what I'm trying to say, but you get a heads up. You get an idea in terms of when your time might be up, how this is going to work. And I went with that approach. And meeting Uncle Jake, I changed the name around. In reality, it should say meeting Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack was really my father's uncle, so he would have been my great uncle. He passed in 62, I think. So I never got to see him. He passed about 11 years before. Yeah, I think it was 11 years before I was born. And Uncle Jack and my grandfather were two of 5 siblings in the family. And, the only time I got to really see anything with Uncle Jack was a handful of photos, black and white photos. And when I say a handful, I mean, think about it. You got your phone, you could take 100 pictures in an hour, right? Whatever. I mean, I don't think they took 100 pictures in a decade, some of these people. So anything I got to know about him was through my father, some of his stories. He was World War I think it was, as far as he got a Purple Heart in World War I. So all these little things kind of came to mind. And the pictures were the only thing I knew of him. So I kind of went with that, and what would Uncle Jack really be like today? And if you talk, so it was a way for me to kind of connect with him. There was no other way to do it, basically. So he was the main character, and then the rest of the characters are kind of based around my life at the time, other people I knew at the time, locations that I was familiar with. I mean, that's really one thing people kept saying, when you did your research, write about things you know. That's what I did, and I kind of that it flew from there instead of trying to come up with an entire story you knew nothing about. And this book is about Uncle Jake, the title, the character, and what his role is and how he is part of we all have an Uncle Jake in our family is what this was about. Uncle Jake was the one who was the messenger. He would come and talk to people. He would let you know what's going on. So that's kind of where this stemmed from, kind of, that'd be cool, you kind of have someone in that type of communication, and where it goes from there, and how it really just kind of, threads together generations, literally, 3, 4, 5 generations of people within a family, even extended family. And I went with it, and people seemed to like it, especially in the family. People were reading it ahead of time. Like I said, my father had passed. It's going to be 5 years coming up this fall, and he got to read it, and he thought it was great. This is kind of before he got sick and all that, but he got to read it. He liked it. But that just kind of gives you an idea. He passed in 2021. He read it sometime before that, and yet I didn't really publish it until February of 25. So it kind of shows you how long it was sitting on the shelf before I really did anything with it. Shame on me, but I'm glad I got it to the finish line. And then just where the story evolves from there. And it was kind of a feel-good story for me, because I got to express a lot of different things. I got to incorporate a lot of the family into something right here. Even if it was just a couple lines, a couple characters, there were still family members I was thinking of throughout this whole process. And I think that's when it kind of took off from there. Um, has it sold 1 million copies? Absolutely not. But it sold a few. And I think the fact that I've sold a few here and there, I've given some away. It feels great, because I was able to do something that, I'm not bragging, but most people don't get to do that, or want to do that. And so to say that I've got a book of my own, that's cool. Love it. And I hope to do more, but it's a matter of finding time. And it's funny, I'll have plenty of time when I'm retired, but I can't do it now. But you want to do it now, so it's just a lot of conflicting thoughts there, and scenarios that you have to just kind of go through. But I've been writing. I've been writing another book. It's about 20,000 words into it. The problem is it's starting to sound more and more like the movie Eddie and the Cruisers, if you know what that's all about. So I have to stop, pivot, and get it away from that. I love the story, what I'm doing, but it's taking on that theme, because it's Jersey related, it's music related, it's things like that, and I got to get away from that. So we're gonna, I've been taking some time, and we'll get to that. But like I said, meeting Uncle Jake was something that I really, really wanted to do for a long time, and I did it. It is what it is. So you've got that there. I'll have some down in the description below, an email address. You could always reach out to me with questions about it. But that's kind of where this all started from, and why, again, I have another episode talking about family, and family is important. And this, I think, it kind of stemmed from there, and it was a way for me to kind of bring my family together and get people laughing about certain things. And I put certain quotes in there that only family members got. So that was cool that they picked up on certain things. I wouldn't change a thing about it, because it is what it is, right? I'm proud of it. Again, and again, truly, if you want to, get a copy of it, it's on Amazon. You can find it there. At least it should be there. You've got that. And I've always, got copies around, and I sign copies for people, which is pretty wild. People want my signature on a book. Who'd have thought? But I do it, and it's cool. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of talk to you about the book, let you know I've got one. And I'm sure I'm leaving out a whole lot of information in terms of why and when and how it all came about. But that was really how it started. That's why people say, "What's it about?" and "How'd you get the inspiration?" The inspiration, number one, was Uncle Jack, from the family, who I changed to Uncle Jake. I just seemed to work well. Maybe I should have kept it. And I went with it from there. I talk about my hometown. I talk about the town I was living in at the time. So if you know me and you can pick up on certain things, you can kind of see where the similarities are, because that's what I knew. That's all I knew. Was it the right thing to do? Yeah, I guess so. Because why would I not want to talk about things that have happened? Situations in life have certainly changed a whole lot since I started writing this book. So there's no regrets with having to change anything within the book or things like that. But I really think I did the right thing with how I kind of just left the book the way it is. And that's really kind of where this comes from. Nothing more than that. I really thought it was something I'm very proud of. I hope to keep writing. I hope to keep doing more. And the whole thing with this book, I think when I started writing this book, that's the one thing I wanted to say. I'm glad I remembered. This was actually the beginning for me in terms of getting into social media. It seems kind of strange because I wasn't doing anything with my guitar channel, with any of my other YouTube channels. And again, all those links will be down below. But the Richie's Music Corner, which is I think the actual for YouTube, it's at Six String Fun. So it's youtube.com/sixstringfun, where I've been doing music lessons and guitar lessons and song tutorials since right before COVID started. So I think it was like February of 2020, which was after I'd started writing this book, obviously. But starting the book was really what kind of was that prime mover, that initial jump into social media platforms and just getting out there. Like if you go back and look at my first video for I forget, it was just like an intro to my guitar channel. I think I've watched it once since, and I just can't bring myself to do it. But I'm not gonna bring it down. But it's like, hi, I'm Rich, and this is my guitar channel, and we're gonna learn how to play some stuff. Yeah, that's how you get the viewers. Yeah, that was great. But I learned a lot from it, right? And it just opened up a whole new world for me. And so that's kind of where I think it all started, was with this book as well. So a lot of things have come from this simple little topic for me in the last almost 10 years now, which is crazy to think about. So for everyone who's been along for the ride, I really do appreciate it. If you can, every little bit helps to keep the channels going and the podcast going. I got some links down below. You can find me on different platforms for any type of virtual donations. They go a long way. Not required, of course, but hey, it certainly is appreciated. And we're gonna end it from here. This is a lot to talk about, and maybe one day we'll come back and talk more about it. Because again, doing this book just kind of opened up a whole lot of other doors in terms of knowing more about the family. I had done family historian work before, but this opened up different things, and you find out different things about the family. So maybe we'll talk about more about that, down the road or something. But thank you again for sticking around. I do appreciate it. Podcasts, I try to do the episodes, try to do them every week. So I'm sticking to that formula. All of you who've taken the time to listen to them, I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you down the road. Later, folks.